Okay, can we hear that? It's the 1930 version. So
Elaine, who's the artist who's singing it?
that is, his name is Jack Hilton, Hylton, the 1930 version. And so #1 on the pop charts. I don't know if Grant was listening to it on the radio while he was painting or not, but he probably couldn't escape it at the time. So here we are. We are recording, and welcome back to the final of our 8 sessions of this season's Grant Wood Country Forum, with special thanks to the Cedar Rapids Public Library for their hosting of both the online piece of the forum as well as the playlist of all these foreign sessions on their YouTube channel. So there is a Grant Wood Country Forum playlist on the Cedar Rapids Public Library's YouTube channel. So you can find all these. And if you scroll down, the most recent one is at the bottom. So there's that. And tonight we've got lots of things happening. We're going to have a song from Mark Armstrong, which he was inspired to write after Joe Coffey's Grant Wood birthday session. And we've got some news from, speaking of Joe Coffey, he's going to do Grant Wood News of the Week, because there always is some. And some of us aren't surprised, but many others might be, that Grant Wood, there's always something somewhere. And that's why we kind of partly why we can keep doing this thing year after year, because it's like an infinite well. Paul has got several factoids today. Paul Jewell, author historian. So we're looking forward to no less than possibly 4 factoids, I heard. That's fun. Linda Peterson has 3 poems. Yay! And Audrey Mueller has a poem. Yay! We're glad about that. And let's see. So the order, I think what we'll do is I would love for us to open with Mark's song, and then all the poetry, and then the factoid, and then the news, and then we'll launch into our feature presentation tonight with photographer and history enthusiast Ben Staley. So that's exciting. Welcome, Ben. Here's all your friendly faces who will no doubt have lots of things to ask you, and will be intrigued by what you've come up with. And I've got one announcement to make. Of course, we did our session on fall plowing, and we have been able to set the date for being able to visit that site. And that date is Saturday, June 15th at 2:00. And so what I will do, for those of you who are interested, I will send out emails as we get closer to the time. But I wanted to give you the heads up, and I'll also give you the address, and so you could find the place. Now, just to be clear, this is not it's an officially protected historic site, designated historic site, but it doesn't have a historical marker. It is on private land. So our presenter from that session, Cindy Burke, has been very gracious, and she's going to show us around that site so that we may imagine it and speak about fall plowing and whatever else we want to do that day. So we can all talk more about that through the emails and that sort of thing as we get closer. So I hope we have quite a few of you that can come, and if you have relatives in that area, I'm sure they could tag along too, if they would like to. So,
and if you'd like, I can investigate the idea perhaps of visiting the Marvin Cohn Gallery.
Yes, would love that.
And the Conger Metcalf, the whole thing. Co has Grant Wood, Marvin Cohn, Conger Metcalf. So
yes, that would be great. If that works out, let me know, and we'll incorporate those. We could because we have a whole morning available to us.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
if that were, you know, possible for us to do that, and that would just be spectacular. That'd be great.
All right.
And of course, the fall plowing site is very close to Anamosa, and anybody who comes up, if they wanted to see Grant Wood's grave site, you could do that, you know, at Riverside Cemetery as well. So anyway, so that's what's happening. So lots of things. So without further ado, Mark Armstrong, do you have your offering? Whoops, you're muted. You're muted, Mark. There we go. Whoops.
Mute.
There we go. Okay.
Can you hear this? All right, so Elaine's little note, melody from 1939 is kind of fitting because I'm running on vintage equipment. This is a 1940s lap steel, and I'm running on a 1939 amplifier that I saved from the landfill. So what I did after Joe Coffey's presentation, a buddy of mine said, why don't I take one of Grant Wood's pictures and interpret it musically? So I picked up Tripp's book last week and I opened it up and it came right up to The Woman with Flowers. So here's my interpretation of it. I'm going to play it through and then I'll talk about it as we go through it again. So it won't take long. So if we look at Woman with Flowers, it starts off, it's kind of brown and dark and just kind of mellow. And overall, it's kind of pretty. And then there's that Sansevieria plant, and it just wants to go vertical. And then I got to looking at her hands, hardworking hands, and they were long and slender, and they've been through a lot. And I looked at the ring she was wearing on there, her wedding ring. And the brooch. And I wondered if that was the brooch that Dorothy was thinking about when she wrote Stone Fruit. And then the cute little earrings, simple. And off her shoulder is the church. And off her other shoulder is the other water tower. Going vertical again. And then there's that cute meandering road. Where does that road go? You just want to hop on and see where it ends up. Is it going to take you along the river? Or where's it going to go? It's just kind of a mystery. And with music, you should always get back to the root note, but I think it's good to stop on this chord right there because it leaves you wanting more. You want to go and see where it ends up. So that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for allowing me the time.
Thank you.
Oh, Thank you, Mark. That was so fun to hear you walk us through your interpretation. That's awesome. Fun
Good.
stuff. Deconstruction right here. And
Yeah.
kind of a salon. And you gave us kind of a salon feel as well. So
Yeah.
that's neat. Uh, well, next up, we said we've got Linda's got 3 poems and Audrey's got a poem. So Audrey, let's do yours.
Okay. Mine's called En Plein Air. Walking fields overlooking Stone City and Viola to be one with nature, surrounded by creatives like Grant himself, students and friends Edward and Adrian of the Art Colony. At his easel or with an art book in hand, Grant sketched and choreographed familiar landscapes, with his additions of underlying personal and cultural comments on a billboard, in sunlit highlights, or in the lean of a tree. To walk where Grant walked 90 years ago warms my heart and fires my creative juices. To have been a member of Stone City's Art Colony would have been a dream. I will sketch plein air today on these hills as Grant would. WOULD. Would.
Thank you. And before Linda shares her 3 poems, Linda's been with us since the beginning and has shared her poetry, and also we've published quite a few of her things in our Chronicle. And I neglected to mention earlier that this year's deadline for submitting some things for publication in this group's publication is Sunday, March 17th at midnight. So if you have anything that you would like to have included in this publication that we distribute to area libraries, you'll get your own copy if you contribute. And also we give it to some other Grant Wood friendly organizations and that sort of thing. So whatever we have left, we spread around. And that's sponsored by the Cedar Rapids Public Library, who generously allows us to pull together our voices so that we have that documented for the future of kind of what we did in the spirit of what we've done together, exploring all things Grant Wood. So love that they are willing to do that for us. Oh, and by the way, in the email I sent, I did put a few just maybe brainstorming questions in case you're, can't think of anything to write. You don't have to write poems. You could write essays, and you could be inspired by any Grant Wood work. It doesn't have to be limited to what we did these sessions this year. Just kind of your feelings about all things Grant Wood, if you'd like to share any of that. So I encourage that. Thank you again. That was Sunday, March 17th at midnight. Thank you. And to cap off the poetry portion, Linda Peterson has some things. And did anybody else have any other writing or poetry they'd like to share? Because I think a couple people popped in after I made that announcement. If so, just chat me and we'll make space for you. Okay, well, without further ado, welcome Linda and her poetry.
Thank you. I liked Audrey's comment about the creative juices, because this group does that for me. Whether it's the poetry or the music or the paintings and the discussion, it's such fun. And last week about the garden, thank you, Barb, and Sylvia too, because gardens are kind of my, one of my favorite things. So these first 2 are both garden oriented. And then before I do the third, I'll ask you a question. The first one is called Garden Visit. As I walk past my grandma's yellow rose, the one that originally came from her home, I remember being a child on a sunny afternoon when my aunts would suddenly appear. They just dropped in for a minute, of course, but my mom somehow knew because the floors were fresh swept and the dusting was done, and fresh cookies were out on a plate, her favorite, the Flo Blue. And hellos were all said, and there were hugs all around. Mom's words would be, I'll put the coffee on. We've got time to see the garden. Come along." The sisters strolled past the flowers, admiring the yellow rose from the home place, wondering aloud if Mom should thin the Queen Anne's lace. They walked the rows. "Oh, there'll be new potatoes soon." "My, don't your green beans look good? I'll send some home with you." And in between, they shared the news of births, of deaths, of worries and joys, remembering their shared times and creating memories anew. And the second garden one is called Memory Garden. Some flower gardens are fancy. Think precise rows with nary a weed and plants with highfalutin names. Not mine, to be sure. Mine tumbles and flows. The plants grow where they want to grow. My garden's a scrapbook, reminders of people I love. Each season is a glimpse of those who are gone. Thelma's white peonies. The pink ones were Mom's. The lilac from friend Mike. The list goes on. I walk in my garden where their flowers still grow, while memory of times in their present still glows. And then my question for you, Elaine, is the last one is one that I did submit for the Grant Wood Poetry Contest. And I
Mhm.
didn't know if it was something appropriate to share here or not. So I'll leave that to you.
Oh, wow. I really,
I wouldn't, I would
Okay.
say
Yeah.
not.
Then
yeah, I was
two
just gonna say because October,
yeah,
we could-
well,
we could- yeah.
we discussed, the overlap, and so that's why I wanted to ask before I read that one. So, garden
yeah,
it
thanks,
is.
Barb, for piping in
I'm-
because,
Yes,
Yeah, I'm just saying that because it's recorded. You don't want to jeopardize your chances. And my understanding from the rules, which I don't have anything to do with, but if you do submit a poem to the contest, you cannot submit it to the Chronicle,
right,
right?
right,
and
Yeah.
for this year, you couldn't, right,
Right.
for this year because of the
Right.
timing of it.
right.
And, yeah, because
So-
we're coming out in the spring and we would have to wait till the fall to have something reprinted.
Oh,
So,
Thank you both. I appreciate that.
yeah.
So that's it
yeah,
for me.
yeah, it's kind of a wonky little wrinkle in how it works, but that's how it works.
Not a problem. Not a
Yeah,
problem.
but you're prolific, so I trust that you'll just come up with all kinds of things. So, yes, yep. So thank you for that. Yes, we've had music, we've had poetry, and now we're gonna have, let's get down to some facts. Some with
Thanks, Elaine. Got
Sure.
about 4 factoids for you today. The first one deals with that painting that the DAR was upset with that Grant Wood did. And by the way, I had always called that Daughters of Revolution. And I noticed that the owners of the painting call it Daughters of the Revolution. So I'm going to have to dig a little deeper to see exactly what that title is. At any rate, even though the DAR was a little upset, actually, Grant Wood and Nan Wood Graham could both trace their ancestry back to the Revolutionary War. Actually, the man was Captain Levi Hollingsworth, and it was on the Wood side of the family. He fought in the Revolutionary War. Second one is, I knew that Grant Wood liked to play card games, and I've read a couple of times that his favorite card game was Russian Bank, a card game I've never heard of. Maybe some of you have before. I don't know how it's played with cards or what, but I throw that out to you. Another thing was that when Grant and Marvin Cohn went to Europe in 1920, they went up to Antwerp, Belgium, and the reason probably they went there is that that was the site of the Olympic Games that year. The doctor had some advice to Grant to help him to quit smoking, and he did pretty much accomplish that, maybe 6 months to a year before he passed. Doctor's advice: put a rubber ball in your pocket and squeeze it every time you have the need to have a cigarette, and also chew gum. And the final one for today is, many of you know that Grant's sister Nan was married to a man named Ed Graham, but some people don't know that Ed had been married before, and he actually had 3 children by that previous relationship. His first wife died, leaving him with the 3 children. She died of TB, and the 3 children were all placed in foster care because he couldn't afford to keep them. So that's your factoids for the final session here.
Okay. Well, thank you, Paul. Those were a little bit juicy. So
Yeah,
Oh, I
That-
have a
that was-
postcard of Daughters. I don't know if you can see it because I've got a background here. But it's Daughters of Revolution, the postcard that came out in 1934, and it's called Daughters of Revolution.
yeah. Well, that's what I had always thought.
Yeah, that's what I've always heard, but this is a postcard that that they had at the museum in Cincinnati, where the painting is.
It could just have been a technical error on whoever was sending me the email.
Right. Thank you, though.
cool. Well, and Grant Wood is in the news again this week, I hear.
Yeah,
But there's something. I
always.
wonder what it is, Joe.
Yeah, found some cool things. We can start with art. One of the 250-ish prints of Grant Wood's tree planting group lithographs sold last week. It was auctioned by Sulis Auctions in Lone Jack, Missouri. That's near Kansas City. This is the first of Wood's 19 lithographs. This one was etched and printed in 1937. It sold for $4,200. That's a little better than it's been selling, so that's fantastic. Maybe some of you have seen this. A coin commemorating Grant Wood was sold at Pacific Global Auction in LA last week. It sold for $2,100. The bullion medallion coin was struck by the U.S. Mint in West Point in 1980. It's 1 troy ounce of 90% gold. It's 3 millimeters thick. Now, there are a couple of different Grant Wood coins floating around out there, made for various commemorative purposes by different organizations. This is the most notable and the most valuable one. Designed by U.S. Mint chief engraver Frank Gasparo, it was part of the U.S. Mint's American Arts Commemorative Series, produced from 1980 to 1984. Now, the idea for the series came from North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms. Governments were selling gold back then, and South Africa had a run on the market. Iowa Congressman Jim Leach suggested the series could depict notable artists. President Carter signed the bill, making these a reality. 10 different artists were commemorated, including Wood, Frank Lloyd Wright, Robert Frost, Marian Anderson, and John Steinbeck. 500,000 Grant Wood coins were struck. 312,709 were sold from the mint. These are bought and sold at coin shops these days and on eBay all the time, actually, for about the price this one sold at. When they show up at auctions, their lots usually pass. So I thought it was interesting that this one sold, so I thought I'd throw it in the news. They did have one sell at Michan's. That's an auction house near Oakland back in January. And that one went for $1,500, much less, but who knows what condition it was in. One of the 250-ish prints of Grant Wood's July 15th lithographs also sold recently. This was lithograph number 6 for Grant Wood from 1938. It sold for $6,500. This was at Swan Auction Galleries in New York. This was a particularly good impression, and that's a really good price too. Grant Wood's Stone City is on the cover of a new history book about Iowa. Jeff Brimmer's A New History of Iowa was published late last year, but is creating some new buzz now. Publisher University Press of Kansas says Brimmer's book is the most comprehensive history of the Hawkeye State ever written. It's a survey of Iowa history from the last ice age all the way through the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, you'll remember a few weeks ago, I told you about the Farnsworth Art Museum in Maine. They have an exhibit called Prints for the People, Associated American Artists. Well, the museum's curator, Jane Bianco, did a virtual talk about the exhibit recently, and that was put on YouTube last week. So if you want to see it, go to YouTube, search Farnsworth Art Museum, and just look at the video lineup and you will see it there. And there you have it. That's Grant Wood News for the week.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, that seemed like there was a lot of action. Sure did. Oh my goodness. Well, here we are, top of the hour, and it is time for our new presenter, new to us presenter. Please give a very warm welcome to photographer and history buff and art history buff, Ben Staley. So glad to have you.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Okay, now we'll need to click on share screen down
Get set up here.
there. Okay, double click on it.
Yep.
And then from the beginning or go over here to. Yeah.
All right. Can you all see the presentation? All set? All right. So this started about 7 years ago. I've been working on this. I've always been interested in local history and art in general I like, and it all started with this painting here. So I'm from Solon, and this is a famous painting among Solon people. It says Solon 5 miles on the right side of the painting. And this is a painting that Grant Wood did that kind of shows the road out to his friend's house, the Stoddard family. They lived on Cottage Reserve. The Stoddard family were, he was a dean at the University of Iowa. And I also have, well, this painting actually shows Lake McBride. Before it became Lake McBride, it was Jordan Creek running right through the middle of the painting. And then they later extended the lake, and this is now Mahaffey Bridge Road. And I also have a map that Grant Wood made. In this map, you can see the same location. In the top right corner of the map, you see an intersection, and that's actually the intersection in the painting. And if you take a left there at that intersection, that peninsula is Cottage Reserve, which is still a neighborhood out on Lake McBride. And that creek running through there is Jordan Creek before it became Lake McBride. And at the middle of the road, near the bottom of the painting, or the drawing rather, you can see it says Stone Quarry. That's an old stone quarry where the stone was used for the Pentecrest and the old Capitol building, and also St. Mary's Church in Solon, which was unfortunately torn down a few years ago. But he says this way to Stoddard's on the map, and there's a joke in the map about him fishing for a whale, if you look in the zoomed in part. Then you all know this one, Eldon, Iowa, the American Gothic House. If you've never been there, it's there's a nice little museum there. And when I was there, they actually had one of Nan Wood's paintings. If you look closely at the porch, you can actually see the plants that were in Woman with Plants. You can see the snake plant on the porch. And also Nan Wood, the model for the painting, she's wearing a similar garb with the rickrack apron and also the cameo brooch, which is actually owned by the Figge. And then this is another one of his most famous paintings, Parson Weems' Fable. This actual house is in Iowa City. That was Grant Wood's house. It's located on Court Street. And it's kind of a funny painting because he uses George Washington's adult head on his body because he felt like that's the only way people would recognize it was George Washington. And there's a lot of different interpretations of this painting. Grant Wood was going to do a series on fables. At the time, there was kind of a movement to get rid of all the American fables because they weren't actually true. And Grant Wood, he actually wanted to preserve these fables, and he thought that they had their own merit as American stories. And if you look in the background, you can see a dark storm cloud over the painting, and you can see his slaves. So that's kind of a statement on the fact that it is a fable. He's this person who represents all good things, but then he really owns slaves. So that's kind of I think a statement that Grant Wood was making, or at least that's my interpretation of it. And this house in Iowa City, that's right next to the Grant Wood Art Colony, it's called, where students at the University of Iowa work on different art projects. Here's Spring in Town. This is one of his final paintings. It's based on the town of Wabeek. It's very similar to an earlier painting of Wabeek called Quilts, and that's why you see the quilts in the background on the clothesline. And I've also heard that the church in the background is a church that was in Wabeek that unfortunately no longer exists. And I'm still trying to find a photo of that church. I haven't been able to find one. I've also heard that it might be the church in Viola, possibly. So there's some debate about that. I've also heard that it's a Clear Lake church, but that one's probably not it. And in the middle, you can see a house that's a house that was in Iowa City that was used as the model. In the top right photograph, you can see Grant Wood is painting that house. That's right next to Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City. If you look closely, you can see the graves behind Grant Wood as he's painting it. And at the bottom, you can see what the house looks like today. It looks quite different now. It's been heavily remodeled. Here's Death on Ridge Road. You probably know that this is based on a car accident that Jay Sigmund was involved in on his way to Stone City. The car in the painting is actually the Stoddard family car that I mentioned earlier, who lived on Cottage Reserve. And on the right side, you see the photograph. That's as close as I could get as a match. That's Ridge Road. It's known as Ridge Road on the Jones County side, and then on the Lynn County side, it's known as Buffalo Ridge Road. It's quite a windy, treacherous road to drive on. And if you saw the earlier presentation on fall plowing, you might have been wondering what that location looks like in real life. And here it is on the right side. That's the photograph of the exact spot where Grant Wood did the painting, and the sketch also. The sketch is part of the Figge collection, and then the final painting is part of the John Deere art collection. Yeah, and one thing that the painting doesn't really show, or the photograph, is that there's a very large valley going through the middle, and it's quite a hike to go up and down that. There's a little bit of a creek at the bottom if there's been a heavy rain. And he was friends with the people who lived at the farmhouse in the background. Maybe that's why he painted it. But it's actually much more scenic if you're looking at it from the viewpoint of the farmhouse. You can see the big, huge valley that's in that area. Now, this one's West Branch, birthplace of Herbert Hoover, another one of his most famous paintings. What's interesting here is that the new bridge at the actual location in West Branch, it was made to look like the old bridge. So before, a few years ago, they had a completely different bridge, and they put in this new concrete bridge to try to mimic the one in the painting that was originally there. And also, if you look, the actual house that Herbert Hoover lived in, it's changed locations a little bit. The larger house in the painting that the guy seems to be pointing at, that's not really the house. It's a bit to the left of there. It's that very small house right next to it. And it's actually turned sideways, perpendicular to where the house is now. Here we have overmantel decoration. This is the Stamets family house. They were friends of Grant Wood's. This is very close to Brucemore near the back entrance. Some of you might be familiar with this house. It hasn't changed much over the years. Now he's done a whole series of paintings in the Amanas. A lot of them were done right next to Carl Flick, who also sketched a lot of these locations. This first one is called Door in Amana. It's also known as Doorstep in Amana. And this is on Main Amana. It's along that main 220th Trail Road as you drive into Main Amana. This house is on the right side of that road. This is also on that same street. This is one of the first houses on the left side. It's known as the Marshall House. And then this is also on that same street. This is the Brick House Kitchen. It's on the right side of the street. And then right across from that building is the Bost House. This is on the left side of the 220th Trail Street in Main Amana. And then here's one that's again on that same street. This is known as the Zimmerman Kitchen House. Last time I checked, I think it was a hotel. And this is in the town of South Amana. This painting is just called Brick House. What's interesting about South Amana is this is also near a general store where Jesse James actually committed a robbery in South Amana. And that general store is still there. And if you go in there, they'll give you information about the event and what happened there. Now, this is a painting that's owned by the Figge Art Museum. This is in Middle Amana. This is the Raymond Kitchen House. It's right up the road from the Whirlpool factory. It's one of the first houses on the right side as you come into town. And then this is the real famous one of the Amanas. This is Young Corn. You probably all know this painting. This is of High Amana in Iowa. This is a farm just north of High Amana. He did a couple of preliminary sketches of this same location. He did one of this farm in High Amana, and he also did one of Lenox Cemetery. And the reason he did one of Lenox Cemetery is because there was a teacher named Linny Schulman, and the painting was done in her memory. And he did a sketch from near where her grave is. And that kind of led to the belief that that might be the location for Young Corn. But the more likely location is this farm just north of town on High Amana. It's on private property, so you have to get permission to go there. The photograph doesn't really match perfectly, but that's because the corn was about 6 feet tall when we went there, and you couldn't really walk over onto the big hillside and get quite the same view. So there's still some debate, but this is believed to be the most likely location. And this is a painting that Grant Wood did to promote a movie called The Long Voyage Home. It's called Sentimental Ballad. That's John Wayne in the painting on the left side, and him and all the other actors actually posed for this painting. And he went out to California to do the painting. And you can see a still shot from the movie on the right side. So it's a little bit different, but still pretty close. Now, he also did a series of paintings in Des Moines. This one's of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. This is very early in his career, 1925. You can see that this monument hasn't changed much over the years. It's right next to the Capitol building. This one is the Dunn Funeral Home patio. This was 1926. He was actually commissioned to do this painting by the funeral home owner. And I think I read that the Turner family actually connected him with this mortuary to do this painting. And I saw that this was part of the collection of the Des Moines Art Center, as was this previous painting, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And so I was wondering what this Dunn Funeral Home was. So I Googled Dunn Funeral Home, and next time I was in Des Moines, I walked into the building and there it was. And Here's a industrial landscape view from Van Vechten Park. This is another early painting of his. It's more in the Impressionist style before he moved to his more famous style. Van Vechten Park is overlooks the Douglas Starch Works. That's what those smokestacks are in the painting. The landscape's actually changed since I've taken this photograph. They've put in a bunch of power lines and telephone poles, and the spire that you see in the painting is a St. Wenceslas steeple in the Newbow neighborhood. If you look closely at the photograph, you can, on the right side of the horizon, you can just barely make out that steeple. Here's Sunlit Studio. This is from inside his studio in Cedar Rapids next to Turner Mortuary. This is his famous studio where he painted American Gothic. And it hasn't changed much except for some of the decorations. The floor is a little different. Here's Woman with Plants. As I mentioned earlier, that's the same plant from the American Gothic painting on the porch, also called a Sansevieria plant, a snake plant, a mother-in-law's tongue, has lots of different names. And the plant in the photo is actually a descendant, or rather a clone, of the original plant in the painting. So their story is that Esher Armstrong, the wife of Robert Armstrong, she wanted to preserve this plant for future generations. So she had the hindsight to make cuttings of it and give it out to her friends around Cedar Rapids. And that's why we still have it today. You can actually buy this sometimes in the Cedar Rapids Art Museum's gift shop. So that's pretty interesting. And since it's a cutting, it's technically the same plant. It's not really a descendant, it's more like of a clone. This is the house that he lived in. It's called 3178. It's right next to Mount Calvary Cemetery. He actually built this house with his friend Paul Hansen. The house in the photo, it's looks very different now. It's been remodeled 2 or 3 times, but I've been told that that is the original house, so it still does exist, even though it looks completely different now. This is the 3-Minute Mill. This is kind of the nickname for this plant. They made 3-Minute Oats. That's how it got its name. This was owned by his friend John Reed. He was the owner of National Oats, which is the name of the company. It's known by lots of different names over the years. Ralston, Treehouse Foods, I think it's known as now. This is not too far from Coe College. It's near Interstate 380. And then this is the exact same factory. This is called Night Scene National Oats. If you look closely, you can see that mural on the side of the building. The outline of it still exists, but the mural itself of the 3-Minute Oats can is long gone. A lot of people think this is Quaker Oats, but it's actually a different company called National Oats. This is Calendula's. This is another early painting by Grant Wood, done in his more impressionist style. This is the original vase from the painting. This is inside the Grant Wood studio in Cedar Rapids. It's on display for people to see if you go on a tour of the studio. And then he also made a lot of Christmas cards for his friends. Here's one. This is of his studio from the outside. Hasn't changed much. And he also did a series of drawings. It was for a pamphlet for Turner Mortuary. This is one of the drawings that he did. It's called Exterior View of Turner Mortuary from the Southwest. This is also one of his early drawings, 1924. I included 2 photos because if you look at the top photo, you can see the tree on the left is still there. And then I took the bottom photo about a year later, and then you see the tree is missing. So that original tree that was in the original sketch is now gone. This is another drawing from that series, the facade from the east of the Turner Mortuary. This is also now the History Center. You can go visit the inside. Here's the front gate. Here's the inside of the History Center, which is at the time the Turner Mortuary. This is called Stairs and Balustrade. Looks pretty much the same as it does now. Here's another view from inside the History Center. This is called the Fireplace and the Round Room. This was also from that series of sketches. He also did some sketches on the history of Cedar Rapids. This one is called Higley's Block. It was a building that was torn down in 1914. He did the sketch in 1926, but if you look at the historical photo on the bottom left, all the way to the left, that's the same building that's known as Higley's Block. It's looking in the opposite direction. And in the photograph, that's what the location looks like now. It's the same viewpoint as Wood's sketch. It's now called the American Building. That's in Cedar Rapids. This is the Lynn County Courthouse. So he did this in 1926. So the building was a brand new building at the time he did this sketch. And this is on Mays Island, of course. Here's another one of his most famous paintings, Arbor Day. A lot of people think that this painting is of the Antioch School in Anamosa. It's actually not. It's of a town called Koningsmark. Now, Koningsmark is right next to where the Cedar Rapids Airport is today. I've been trying to find a photo of this school. Haven't been able to find one. But yeah, I'm sure the Antioch School provided inspiration for Grant Wood. That was his childhood school. So memories of going to that school, I'm sure, provided inspiration for the final painting. But on the bottom left side, you can see that's roughly near the town of Koningsmark, and I'm not sure where the exact spot of the painting is, but that's an approximate viewpoint. One of his most famous paintings, Stone City. Not much to see today because of all the trees obstructing the view, but you can see the same stone quarry is there. And a lot of those buildings are still there. The St. Joseph Church and the old general store is still there. Here's some more photos of Stone City. At the bottom right, you can see St. Joseph's Church. And then at the top, you can see a panoramic view of the Stone City landscape with all the trees in the way. Here's the old J.G. cherry plant. This is in Cedar Rapids. It's in the Newbo neighborhood. He did a series of paintings of the J.G. cherry plant. You can see the building on the left is gone, but the plant is still there on the right side. But the railroad tracks are now gone. This is another painting that's part of the Des Moines Art Center collection. It's called View from Ellis Park First Fairway. It was done in 1919, which is the same year that that golf course was created. So this was a brand new golf course at the time he did this painting. That's not the same tree that's in the painting, but that is a picture of the first fairway at Ellis Park Golf Course. Here's a fanciful depiction of the roundhouse and power plant. This is of Cedar Lake in Cedar Rapids. The power plant is now gone, but you can see in this historical photo, you can see the 4 smokestacks that are in the painting. He decided to turn the smokestacks of the power plant into a castle. And you can also see the roundhouse on the left side of the painting and then on the left side of the old photograph. In my photograph, that's looking at the location where the old power plant used to be, but it's not there anymore, and neither is the roundhouse. This is Indian Creek Summer. This was back during his Impressionist period. In the same way that Monet did his haystacks and water lilies, Grant Wood did his paintings of Indian Creek at different times of the year and times of the day. I took this photo near where he lived, next to Mount Calvary Cemetery in the Kenwood neighborhood. And then I wanted to briefly mention his lithographs. A few of those lithographs are known locations. The one of the horses, February, that's rumored to be Curtis Bridge Road, which is the road between Shoeyville and North Liberty. The story goes that he stopped and did a sketch of those horses going between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. I was trying to confirm that story. I wasn't able to find out any more on it, but he also did his December afternoon lithograph, which is of a shed that got torn down that used to be in Clear Lake. And then he also did his March lithograph, which is, I've heard, one of the old prison farms in Anamosa. I don't know which one. I've heard there were multiple prison farms at the time. And then here we have Shrine Quartet. In the background, you see the Pyramids of Giza. Now, obviously, we all know the Pyramids of Giza are not in Iowa, but there are scaled down versions of the Pyramids of Giza in Iowa. Grant Wood didn't use these as models for his lithographs, but I thought this was an interesting and odd bit of Iowa history that was worth mentioning. These are called the Monroe County Pyramids. There was a guy that was really into Egyptian archaeology, and he created scaled down duplicates of the Pyramids of Giza in the same dimensions. And his wish was that he would be buried in them when he died, but unfortunately they did not honor his wishes. They're pretty big. The tallest one is about 14 feet tall. It's not easy to find. It's on an unmarked gravel road in the middle of nowhere in Monroe County near the towns of Avery and Albia. Now that does it for Grant Wood. Now we'll move on to other Iowa regionalist artists. I'll start with Marvin Cohn, his lifelong best friend. Most of you probably know this one, Little Bohemia. It's one of the oldest bars in town. Hasn't changed much over the years. This is in the Newbo neighborhood. And then here's another one by Marvin Cohn called Road to Wabeek. This is driving towards the town of Wabeek, going from south to north. A lot of the original buildings are gone now. And here's one of Stone Fruit that Marvin Cohn did. If you look closely at the sculpture and the painting, it matches all the fruit in the stone sculpture that was at the Stone City Art Colony that you see in the photograph. Here's another one by Marvin Cohn. It's called Lilies for a God. It's actually on display at the Stewart Library at Coe College. They still have that original sculpture. And he did a whole series of paintings on Stone City. This one's called Stone Quarry. It looks like the one on the top right might be a early sketch, and then the bottom left might be the final painting. They're pretty similar. Again, you have the trees in the way, but you can see in the photograph, you can see the Church of St. Joseph's, and you can also see the quarry in the background. And here's another one he did of Stone City. This is in the Coe Library. It's available for the public to view. And in this one, you can see the old general store on the bottom right of the photograph. Here's another one he did of Stone City. So this is that same house in the middle of the painting. In the photographs, that's looking towards where that house is. And then on the left side of the photograph, that's St. Joseph's Church. Here's another one that Marvin Cohn did. This one is in Mount Vernon. It's called Corner Tavern. This is at the corner of Highway 1 and that main street going through Mount Vernon. I haven't been able to find a colored version of the painting, but I have this black and white image. This is an artist called Marion Gilmore. She was a student at the Stone City Art Colony. This is called Band Concert. This was done for the Corning Post Office. The people of Corning, when they saw the early drawing or the early painting, they weren't happy with it because it actually resembled a different town. The bandstand in the painting is actually the town of Hedrick, Iowa. In the background of the painting on the top left, you can see an obelisk monument and a cannon monument next to the bandstands. And those used to be at the town of Hedrick at this bandstand. You can see the bandstands changed over the years. They've added a second floor to it, but the pedestals of the two monuments are still there, but the cannon and obelisk are now gone. And at the bottom right, you can see the final version of the post office mural. You can see that she changed it to make it look more like the town of Corning's bandstand, where she removed the cannon and the obelisk and changed the way that the bandstand looks. Now, this isn't one of my photos, but this is of it's called Prairie Trails Museum. It's in the town of Corydon. You can see that the post office mural on the top left has a fire engine, and that exact fire engine that's in the mural is on display at the museum in town. And also those houses in the post office mural are real houses in the town of Corydon. They're not all together like that, but I don't know how many of them are still there. I haven't had a chance to go there yet. But Marion Gilmore is a pretty interesting artist. She was a Stone City Art Colony student. She was also a student of Edward Hopper's in New York City. So that's pretty amazing to have Grant Wood and Edward Hopper be your two art instructors. If you don't know who Edward Hopper is, he did the Nighthawks painting of the diner. This one is called After Church. This is by John Bloom, another Stone City Art Colony student. This is in his hometown of DeWitt, where he grew up. This is depicting the kids trying to get out of church at the end of the service, and people are blocking the door and they can't get out. It's pretty funny painting. Here's another one by John Bloom. This is of the town of DeWitt again. This used to be the county fairgrounds, but now it's the school racetrack. The county fairgrounds are still next to this location. So it's changed quite a bit, but in the horizon of the photograph, I was able to see that there's still trains going by, just like in the painting in the top right, you can see a train going by. Those train tracks are still there. And here's another one by John Bloom. This is in Davenport. This is called Monkey Island. Unfortunately, it's no longer there. There used to be a zoo in this park, February Park. It's right across from the Putnam Museum. And this is called View Down the River from 8th and Vine. This is by John Bloom, and this is also of Davenport. At the bottom right in the photograph, that's the actual 8th and Vine intersection. But you don't have the same view that he had nowadays because of the trees. So if you move about half a block over, you can get the same view. In the painting, that's the railroad bridge going over the Mississippi. And then in the top right of the painting, that's the old Purina plant, and that's still there. And here's some more by John Bloom. He did a whole series of lithographs of the Davenport riverfront. This one's called Roller Dam 15. This is near LeClaire Park. It hasn't changed much at all in the years, but this is one of his more recent lithographs. This is from 1995. Now here's another one called Checkers. This is also of LeClaire Park. You can see that same radio tower in the background of the photo. This one's called Ferry at the Dock. There used to be a ferry that ran between Rock Island and Davenport. And in that photo, you can see the same ferry and the same on and off point for the dock. This is the same location. This is what the location looks like nowadays. Here's one called Natatorium. This no longer exists. This was near LeClaire Park. It was at the end of Main Street in Davenport. This is also of the riverfront in Davenport by John Bloom. This is of the Centennial Bridge in the top left corner. And this is one of his most famous lithographs. It's called Watching the Ferry. This is also of Leclerc Park, and they actually made a statue that was very similar to the lithograph, and that's in a different park called Lindsay Park, just down the road. And now we move on to Mildred Pelzer, who's a good friend of Grant Wood, also is a publicist. And this is one of her most famous paintings called Symphony of Iowa. It's a enormous painting. And in the middle, you can see our capital. And that she has all the different towns of Iowa and all the bridges. That's owned by the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. Here's another one by Mildred Pelzer. It's called We Build the Capitol. This is of Iowa City. The architect of this building was John Francis Ragu. He was a famous architect from Dubuque. He got into an argument while the building was being built, and he left the project, and it got taken over by a priest named Samuel Mazzucchelli, and that's who you see in the painting. Now we move on to Carl Flick. Carl Flick was probably the Amana Colony's most famous artist. This is called Amana Funeral. This is in East Amana. He was also a student at Stone City Art Colony. Here's another one by Carl Flick. This is in Maine, Amana. This is the backside of the Amana Meat Shop and Smokehouse. And then the creek running through the painting is still there too. And this is Keith Van Duzy, another artist at the Stone City Art Colony. She was from Dubuque, and this one's called Milk Wagons, and that's of the famous water tower in Stone City. Here's another one by the same artist. This is the Old Dubuque County Jail and Farley Lustre Company. And this is of the old jail. It was also designed by John Francis Ragu. There's a lot of buildings in Dubuque that he was the architect for. This is one of the rare examples of Egyptian revival architecture that still exists. And this is the same artist again. Here's the Shot Tower and Star Brewery in Dubuque. Both those buildings still exist. And the Shot Tower, that was an old building that was used to make lead musket balls. There was a grid at the top of that tower, and then they would pour lead down that grid, and then the musket balls would form a perfect circle falling down that shaft all the way to the ground. And by the time they hit the ground, they cooled and they were musket balls. This is the same artist. This is called Cathedral. This is of St. Raphael's Cathedral in Dubuque. This is taken from the viewpoint of the Fenelon Place elevator, if you've ever been there, overlooking the Mississippi River. And then here's another artist called Christine Glassell. She was also a Stone City Art Colony student. This is called Street Scene. This is of Dubuque. And this is the City Hall building. And this is another building designed by John Francis Ragu. You can see that the clock tower is different. The tower deteriorated and it was torn down in the 50s, and they rebuilt it and they made it the same as it originally was. But you can see that in the old painting, it was already partially gone. Now we move on to Arnold Pyle, another Stone City. He was an instructor, not a student. This is of the Nouveau neighborhood. This is the Little Bohemia bar on the right side of the painting. The top left painting rather, that's the sketch of the painting. And then on the right side, that's the final version of the painting. If you look at the sketch though, you can see it says Praha at the top of the building in the middle. That was the old theater that the local Czech population used that worked at the Sinclair meatpacking factory that all lived in that neighborhood. And here's another one by Arnold Pyle. This is in Marion. It's of 8th Avenue. And if you look closely, you can see the train going by in the painting. And then you can see those same train tracks in the photograph on the horizon there. And interestingly enough, that is now a bike trail that's called Grant Wood Trail. Now we move on to Nellie Gebbers. This is another Stone City Art Colony student. This is called Twain's First Print Shop. Mark Twain briefly lived in Muscatine. The original print shop is gone now, but in the painting, the building behind the print shop still exists. You can see it in the photograph. That's the building you're looking at. And there's also a historical marker on the location where that print shop used to exist. And they explain how the family home was right next to the print shop across the street, but that's also torn down. And I have a quote here by Mark Twain. "And I remember Muscatine still more pleasantly for its summer sunsets. I've never seen any on either side of the ocean that equaled them. The sunrises are also said to be exceedingly fine. I do not know." In other words, he's joking that he never got up early enough to see the sunrise. And in the historical photograph, you can still see the original Twain's print shop looking in the opposite direction. Here's William Bunn, a Muscatine artist. This is called High Bridge at Muscatine. The bridge actually collapsed, and now we have the modern bridge in the background. And this structure is all that remains of the original High Bridge. And in the painting, you can see a similar structure at the end of the bridge. This is a part of the Muscatine Art Museum's collection. Here's another one from the Muscatine collection. This is the same artist called View of Mississippi from Wyoming Hill. Wyoming Hill is a big hillside east of town in Muscatine, and that's the viewpoint of the painting. Unfortunately, you can't really get that same viewpoint anymore because it's all private drives. So this is closer to the water, so you don't get that same hillside view. This is an artist called Bertrand Adams. He did a post office mural for Dubuque called Early Settlers of Dubuque. And in the mural, you see lots of different parts of Dubuque history. You can see Julian Dubuque's grave in the top left side of the mural. That's what's in the photograph, that castle-looking building. And then again, you can see the shot tower on the right side of the building. And in the background, you can see an old lead mining shaft. Dubuque was famous for its lead mines. And in the mural, he included a man named Kelly, who legend has it, buried his fortune next to one of these lead mines, and he left it in his will to his family to go find and dig for his fortune. And here's another Dubuque artist called Dorothy Bechtel Rossiter. She was an important part of the early formation of the Dubuque Art Association, as was Grant Wood. I don't know if those two ever met though, but this is the Fenelon Place elevator in Dubuque. And then this is the same artist. This is the town clock in Dubuque from 1945. You can see that the town clock has moved. It's in a completely different part of town now, but the buildings in the painting are still exist, and they haven't changed much. And then here's a student called Harold Palmer Allison. He was a Stone City Art Colony student. This is a painting that he did while he was a student of Marvin Cohn's at Coe College. This is of the Newbo neighborhood in Cedar Rapids. This is St. Wenceslas Church. And in the foreground of the painting, you can see the small homes that the Czech immigrants lived in that all worked at Sinclair Meatpacking. They're very small homes, and some of them still exist in that neighborhood. This is another Stone City Art Colony student, Helen Hinrichsen. This is called Farmer's Holiday. Now, she did this painting the same year that the Farmer's Holiday strike occurred. So this was a painting of a current event at the time. And what happened was farmers weren't getting paid adequate prices for their crops or their livestock. And so they barricaded and blocked off different roads going into Council Bluffs and also Sioux City. And they wouldn't let anyone go through with their crops, and in the background, you can see that there's a marker. It says Highway 75, and that is the main highway in western Iowa. And in the right side, you can see the historical photograph. It looks pretty similar. That's of the farmer's holiday. This is the same artist. This is of the Lincoln Douglas debate. This isn't one of my photos, but this is in Springfield, Illinois. Again, this is another building by John Francis Ragu from Dubuque. And you can see it bears a striking resemblance to the old Capitol in Iowa City. And here's an artist called Robert Tabor. He's a very interesting artist because he didn't start painting until he's in his 50s, and he was completely self-taught. And Grant Wood hired him to be part of his New Deal art projects. He said it was against his better judgment because of his little experience that he had, but he said he couldn't turn down anyone during the Great Depression. And I think it paid off because he turned out to be a really great artist. Here's one of his most famous paintings called Discovery. This was one of his later paintings done in 1962. That's of James Van Allen, the famous scientist and space engineer. And this is of the basement of McLean Hall, which is on the Penncrest. That's where his old laboratory was. And this is of him and his team discovering the Van Allen belts. In the photograph, you can see that's one of the rooms down in the basement of McLean Hall. I'm not sure which room was the exact room, but it's interesting that they still have the mathematical formulas on the chalkboard. And this is before Van Allen Hall was built, so the McLean Hall was the old astrophysics building. Here's another one by Robert Tabor. This is called Main Street. The actual name for the street is First Street, but it's commonly known as Main Street. At the bottom left, you can see the historical photograph of how it looked at the time he did the painting. And on the top right, you can see that's of the same street corner, how it looks today. But all the buildings have changed. The drugstore and the bank building are no longer there. It's a completely different bank building, but it's still a bank. And there's an inside joke for the people of Independence. You can see the guy sitting on the corner on the steps of the bank building, rubbing his gums. And that was a guy that lived in the town of Independence that was known to do that. And so that was kind of an inside joke. And here's another one by Robert Tabor called Postman and Storm. I want to thank Judy, the Independence historian, that helped me out with this. And I also want to thank the librarians in Independence for helping me out with this. This is the post office mural in Independence. This is an actual postman that Robert Tabor knew. His name, I have his name here. It was William Sackett was his name. And there's a couple different theories about where this location is. Most people assume that it's that same Main Street, First Street in Independence, but the more likely location is actually 3rd Street of Independence. That's the photo on the top left. That's the Gedney Hotel, which no longer exists. It looks pretty similar to the building in the painting, not an exact match, but he might have done some little changes to it to make it look more generic. That's also the location of where the post office used to be in Independence. And here's another Robert Tabor painting. It's called Portrait of a Library. This is the old library building. It's no longer the library. They have a new one now, but it's known as the Munson Building. And the librarian in the painting was actually Robert Tabor's sister. Her name was Neva Tabor. And this painting is on view at the Muscatine Library. And that's everything.
You click on it. Yep. Where it says stop share, that red.
And if anyone has any questions or comments, I'd love to hear about it. Or if there's any places you know of that I missed, that I'd love to hear about that too.
Oh, Ben, it's a cornucopia. It's like, it's just a treasure trove. Good night. That was special. Thank you for sharing all that work. And I can tell that you're passionate about it, because it's just the breadth and depth of it is just a wonderful way to cap off the series. Perfect. I mean, just touching on Grant Wood and just go out from there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'll stop gushing so others can.
Thank you.
Ben, do you have any plans for like how much longer you'll do this, or it's just like forever? But what will you do with it?
Well, probably
would you-
forever, because I keep finding new places all the time.
Yeah.
I've found new places as recently as a couple weeks ago that I added at the last minute. And yeah, so yeah, I'm always looking for new places, and yep.
You'll just keep on going as long as you can keep finding. And you're going to give presentations like this, will you?
This is the first one, so yeah,
Okay.
maybe I can do more in the future.
Share it with others. Good. It was wonderful. Just awesome.
Thank you.
I have one other question. Do you know why Grant didn't do any more fables? He wanted to do more.
Yeah, so he had plans to do one on Pocahontas,
Yeah.
where the event where she saved John Smith.
Oh, right.
Paul might actually know more about this subject. He wrote a book on it, Grant Wood Unfinished Projects.
Yeah.
Do you know more about that, Paul?
Well, you're right. It was Pocahontas was going to be his next one, but it never happened.
He just lost interest in something else came up probably.
Well, maybe if he had lived longer, I think he probably would have done it. So
Yeah.
I think he was working on these pretty late in life, those fable things.
Okay.
Yeah, who knows?
You really know an awful lot of good background data. It's impressive. I'm sure Paul's been a good influence on you for details, but yeah, that's great.
Ben, that was fabulous. I really, really am amazed at how much you have there. That was great. I have a question while we're talking about the fables. In Parson Weems' fable, is that building the one that Grant Wood lived in, or you just had them next to each other? Is that
Yeah, the building, that's his home in Iowa City, Grant Wood's home.
wow,
He
I never
used-
did.
He used his own house as the model for George Washington's house.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you can go see that on Court Street in
Really?
Iowa City. And the owner of the house, he's left it to the university in his will. So I think it'll probably become part of that Stone City, or not Stone City, but the Grant Wood Art Colony that's at the university.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I've never been inside it, but I've seen the outside.
I have been inside it, and it's fabulous. It is. It's worth a visit.
Yeah.
Although I think it's not open as a museum yet.
No, this is
still-
private
It's
residence.
a private home.
Yep.
Yeah. But I had, connections. I was working at the art museum.
I noticed some similarities in a lot of the artists' works that kind of I could see Grant's influence on them. But this just opened up a lot of artists I had never heard of before, so that I want to look into further. They were fantastic. But I did have one question. I love the painting Grant did, Sentimental Ballad. And does anybody know if that's owned at a museum, or is it privately owned? Does anybody know about Sentimental Ballad with the movie stars in it?
I don't remember.
I do.
Paul's looking it up.
And that was part of a junket. A handful of artists
Yeah.
went on that trip, and the studio paid them to kind of do promo PR. It was a brilliant PR move. And I've never really looked into it, but I've always known that'd be a fun thing to dig into later. What are the other works of art that came from that junket?
Yeah, Thomas Hart Benton was one of the other artists that was hired for that project. Yep.
Is that in Connecticut, Paul? New
Yeah,
Britain is-
that's, can you hear me? I'm back here with.
Yeah.
It's at the New Britain Museum of American Art in New Britain, Connecticut.
Mhm.
And we just went to a talk, Marla's heard that too, by Sandra Hudson. John and Sandra Hudson live here in Iowa City. And they talked about Grant Wood in Hollywood. And they said something I never heard before, is that all of these artists did the paintings. And the only one that they know where it is right now is Sentimental Ballad. The others are lost. And they were excellent paintings by all of these well-known people. And something happened, where was it, Marlis, after Florida somewhere? Do you remember? You're muted.
They were transporting them, and Sandra and others have made some conjectures about the person that was in charge of the paintings. They didn't get along. I don't know whether it was money or something. It was with the artists and the people at the movie studio. And all of those were going to be on tour. They did take them on tour to help advertise the movie. But then they just disappeared, literally. They have no, Grant never put his in. He did his here in Iowa. He did his painting here in Iowa. So it never made it to the California group. So that might be part of the reason, because Grant, according to Sandra, took a long time to paint. He was very meticulous, and it took him longer than everybody else to get his painting done. But the other ones, whether or not the person who was in charge of the tour or the man who was in charge of the paintings that, according to them, found homes for them or kept them himself, or what, she literally, and she did a presentation at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art just 2 weeks ago. And she has dug really deep. I mean, don't you agree, Paul? I mean, she's literally, she's got a lot of really firsthand knowledge from libraries where all of this information is stored. One she's yet to go to is the Yale information, but she's just picked this as a topic that she has and it's all firsthand. And I think someone at the thing talked to her about putting together, I don't know whether putting together maybe some kind of a written booklet or article, because this is such good research.
Right, Joni Kinsey was there.
Joni Kinsey.
And Joni was the one that suggested this needed to be written down and put in some form. I think though, Marlis, I think Sentimental Ballad did go to Hollywood. But somehow and I think they were leaving Florida to come back to Iowa.
Yeah.
Or when these paintings all seemed to disappear, except American Ballad. Now, one thing that was mentioned was that this whole project had been sponsored by the Associate American Artists. I think that was a group that did the lithographs.
Right.
And there was some disagreement there, and quite possibly the paintings, and they were wonderful paintings.
Oh.
They maybe went into the hands of some of these people that were managing the Association of American Artists. That's kind of what I know about it. Sandra could do much better job of explaining that to you, but it's an interesting mystery.
She also said that because it took Grant, I don't know, 2 or 3 months to do this, and he was being paid the whole time by the studios. What did she say? He made more money from this one painting than all of his other commissions together? Didn't she say that, Paul?
I think something like
Like
that.
that. Yeah, he was
and
paid,
He had a per diem, so he
yeah,
had coming every day too. I mean, he was
right,
living it up in California.
yeah,
He was the slowest of the, I think there were 11 paintings done.
yeah.
He was the slowest of the painters.
And yeah, the slowest of the painters. He was quite the Hollywood guy, Grant was. It said, what did she say? Edward G. Robinson and his wife owned Daughters of Revolution and also owned the teacup, and that was in the hands, and a lace collar and that Nan got for her. So they owned those. So there's quite a few Hollywood, stars owned Grant Wood personal.
I think I'd say note to Elaine, this
Yeah.
is a woman we need to have on next year.
Oh,
Sandra.
Sandra would be wonderful. Sandra Hudson.
Sandra?
Yeah.
What'd you say, Sandra Hudson?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the scrapbook that Nan had given me, because she loved all the Hollywood stuff.
Mhm.
And she wrote a page, and I think she called it her biggest thrill
Mhm.
when she and Ed had tea with Mrs. Robinson,
Mm.
and she talked about giving them the teacup, and but who knows where that teacup is now. So but yeah, I think Nan liked the Hollywood connection as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you said New Britain Museum, is that what you said, Paul, where Sentimental Ballad is?
Yes, New Britain.
Okay, thank you.
Paul
Yes.
or Marlis, do you think that the museum recorded Sandra's talk?
I think maybe they did, Sylvia, and it,
Oh, was there a photographer there?
well, I didn't see one, but they often do record them,
Well,
so,
maybe they did.
yeah,
That would be
I'm not
wonderful.
sure.
Check
I would
with Sean
I
Ulmer.
would hope they did.
Yeah. Oh,
But you could contact Sean Ulmer and
Yeah.
and he'd be able to tell you.
it was excellent. The whole, yeah.
Sandra
Farmers,
is a fabulous researcher, and she's done a lot about the Czech castles and things. And she and John spent a great deal of time there. And when we used to have an active guild at the museum, she would present information about her research into Czech culture and history, and it would just blow you away how thorough. Everything felt like a master's thesis, at least, yeah.
Farmers Holiday,
Oh,
Pete?
yeah.
Farmers Holiday. Go.
I didn't get what you asked.
Farmer's Holiday, Steve Hankin, go.
Oh, yeah, go,
Okay.
go, Steve.
Farmers Holiday doesn't get a lot of play, but that's a story that's really unusually interesting to me because that whole thing happened in Plymouth County, where US 75 goes into Sioux City. And there was a person that was murdered there. And I think that's what she was depicting with the person that's laid out on the ground there is the person that was killed. Now, this was a situation that happened over a milk strike, partially or largely, and they were keeping people from going into the town and selling milk. The people that were selling milk within the city were getting a higher price than the farmers were getting, and this was tough times for the farmers. And there was all sorts of things going on in Plymouth County. They threatened to hang a judge if he didn't stop foreclosing on farmers. And that turned into a big to-do, and the governor turned out the National Guard with machine guns in order to quell the rebellion that was taking place in Plymouth County. And this is something that's spawned early on in the Dakotas, and there was a socialist movement, and even in Minnesota there was a socialist movement, and this was spreading into Iowa, and then all of a sudden it's done. It didn't go any further than that. But that was one of the interesting times in farming, because the farmers are finally getting what they should have gotten for their goods. And even in Minnesota, the Democratic Party in Minnesota was not called the Democratic Party up until just a few years ago. It's always been the Farm Labor Party. And that's from that same movement. And these is all written down in several books, but you have to go really looking for them in order to find them. And one is called Red Harvest, and I got that book at home, and it's really excellent, interesting stuff. Where in the Dakotas, they took over and set the freight rates on the railroads. They started their own bank. So there's only one state bank in the entire United States, is the State Bank of North Dakota. And they used their state bank in North Dakota to save them all kinds of money on bonds and all that sort of thing, because they ran it through their own bank. And they had set up storage for grain for the wheat farmers. Otherwise, they were just sucking it, because they would change the freight rates about the time that the wheat would come in, and it would cost them more money to ship to Minneapolis. And in the times when they weren't shipping wheat, the freight rates were high, because they wouldn't allow the farmers to get any special rates for ordering machinery or anything from Minneapolis. They were paying higher rates either way, whether it was coming or going. And it's quite interesting that something that was actually working against capitalism for a change and working for the people that needed to help. So that's all I got to tell about that.
What year was that?
This is the 1930s.
30s.
Yeah, and that was the artist Helen Henriksen. And she was
Yeah.
one of the art colony students
Yes.
that Ben captured. So yeah, from that was evocative. I knew I was thinking when I saw that, well, there's a story behind that. And Steve Hankin to the rescue. Oh.
Yeah, 1932 was the year of that farmer's holiday.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, goodness. Well, Ben, what do you think? You've done it. And you better just do it again, because people are going to love it. And you have all these place tie-ins. I'm sure you could stay very busy if
Yeah.
you were so inclined.
Yeah, if anybody knows of any locations I didn't cover, I'd love to hear about it. Yep.
Well, it's hard to imagine at this point.
Yeah, including those other artists from Stone City and elsewhere, that really opened it up a lot. Doubled the number of places.
Yeah, I was especially intrigued about the one Marion Gilmore, who was also Edward Hopper's student.
Yeah.
So that was neat.
Yeah.
And she's from Ottumwa, born and buried.
Yep.
I noticed.
Paul?
So
Okay.
very Iowa.
There is the Cherry Building, and the painting of it that you might want to add to your collection in Cedar Rapids.
That was in there, Steve.
Oh, was in there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, sorry.
I think there's one other artist with a connection. You got talk amongst yourselves. So I'm gonna grab the book.
You have literally a picture, at least one from every Stone City artist that we know. Do you have it? I mean, have you been able to find a picture of from each one?
No, I don't. It'd be nice to have that though.
Okay.
That for me, the main obstacle is just finding out about the paintings in the first place. A lot of them you don't even know exist.
So we can send suggestions to Paul and he will contact you. He can
Yeah,
be,
they
he can
get
be,
a hold of Paul or Elaine, they can give you my email.
okay.
Yeah, I love seeing new paintings that I don't know about, so, and then I
Good.
try to find where they are.
I've
Well,
got
this-
a breadcrumb for you to track down. Maybe you've heard of this one. I recently saw a Gazette article, I think it was Gazette, after one of the Europe trips where Wood and Cone would show their stuff at the library or the art center. And it made mention that if you look closely, you may recognize one of those Paris fountains. He actually did this painting when he got back, but made it look like he did it in Paris. And so that's all it said. And I've always thought, oh, that might be fun to figure out which one that is and match it up with an old photograph. Have you heard of that before?
So it's a painting that's actually an Iowa fountain.
According to the whoever the commentator was in the Gazette, hinted that yeah, it was actually mixed in with all the other European paintings, but that one was actually of an Iowa fountain.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to see that. Yeah.
The thing that,
Stephen,
go
I'm
ahead.
interrupting you.
Go ahead.
There is a mural done by a man whose last name is Henning on the wall at Harrison Elementary in Cedar Rapids. And Harrison, as you probably have heard, is sort of on the chopping block. I don't know what the progress of that is right now, but it was during the WPA time, and I would swear just from looking at the mural that this man had to be influenced by Grant Wood. It's a wonderful, wonderful mural. And for years, it did not have any protection. And I taught at Harrison for quite a while. And I used to have to check the children to make sure they didn't have pencils in their hands because they would go by and, you know, do things with pencils. The mural, they finally now have plexiglass over it. But it would be interesting to find out about that particular person, Henning, and see if there was anything connected to Grant Wood, because boy, I'll tell you, the mural itself definitely looks like a Grant Wood influenced piece.
Yeah, I've heard of that mural. I've seen pictures of it. I haven't seen it in person, but yeah, I've heard that if the school does get demolished, that they'll save the mural. And yeah, if he worked under Grant Wood during the New Deal, the odds are that yeah, you probably knew him.
What I'd like to know is where all the artwork went that was sold on Sundays for less than $1 in most cases when the Stone City Art Colony was operating. And mostly local people picked up on that stuff. That's what I would really be interested in seeing, and some of the stuff that was sketches and pencil work and charcoal work and things like that. And it's sold for little of nothing. I know they used to do tours when the art colony was operating, where you paid a dime and they would let you look at whatever they were working on. And I can't imagine that there's not somebody out there with photographs of some of that work in progress. And where did it all go? You know, somebody's got that somewhere, but where?
Yeah, a lot of these lesser known paintings, the location's unknown. They're privately owned, so no one really knows who owns it. Like a lot of those Amana paintings that I showed were like that. The owners are unknown. Yeah.
Right.
I have two other suggestions. In the Cole Library is a chair that was used in a Marvin Cone painting. The painting is in the Cole Library. So the chair from the painting is sitting right next to the painting itself. That seems to fall into what you might like. And then there's the what?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know about that one. So that's good.
So you can see that one, and also there's the painting of a lithograph of the graduation of the honorary degree. And I understand that was Lawrence, Lawrence College and now Lawrence University. So I'm wondering if that scene is at Lawrence University in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
So I found this, so, there's an Iowa artist, Ben Eve Drulow, who had, have you heard of her?
Yeah, I've heard of her.
Yeah, and so her things are, I don't, she moved to Boulder, but and I know they did an exhibit of some of her things in Cedar Rapids, and her things are at the University of Iowa. And where those, if she painted locations in Iowa, that could be, she was quite prolific, and she's a very interesting person. So that could be another rabbit hole for you. I know it's one that I started to go down, and then I got waylaid by other things, but definitely an interesting person, and a contemporary of Grant Woods. I mean, at least of the same era, but I think she married a college professor or a dean or something. And then they traveled a lot. And so she painted a lot overseas. So you might have to wade through a lot of her paintings to find the Iowa things, but I'm sure they're there.
Yeah, I don't know of really any paintings that she did of Iowa scenes, but I haven't seen that many, and yeah, I'd like to see some.
Yeah, I think a lot of her things are on the you can find online. She painted things like her own self-portrait of her in her own gown, and some interest. Oh, Hyde Park. That was interesting. But anyway, all kinds of things.
Elaine,
Yeah.
I went to that exhibit in Cedar Rapids, but I may be confusing her with someone else, but I don't think it was a happy marriage. I think that she felt very, very restricted by being married. So
Yeah, there's the book. Yeah, I don't know about the marriage itself. It's more maybe the situation. She refused to do the duties of a dean's wife. Is what I recall.
right, maybe they were blissful, but she rejected what the expectations were. That's right.
Yeah, something like that. And she kept her name too. I mean, she.
Well, I have a happy story that kind of is related to tonight. We're putting in a sunroom, and had the representative from Hometown Restyling came over, and he was looking at it and doing measurements, and he noticed that I had all these Grant Wood things, and we started talking. And the next time he came with the contract, he brought me a gift, and that gift is one of the clones of the original Sansevieria's plant in Woman with Plants. And he said he knows that it came from there because when he first started working, he went up to a home of a little old lady whose name he doesn't remember. And she had these plants, and she had next to them a letter from Grant Wood stating that this was his, and it was signed. It was a document signed by him. So I don't know if it was Esther Armstrong a long time ago or what, but I now own a piece of that plant, and that's really cool.
Yeah, how fun is that?
I know it
Oh, good.
might be just a story, but it's still, yeah. I like to think that it's real.
I've always thought it'd be interesting if somebody did like genetic testing on all those plants that everyone owns and
Yeah, at some point you kind of wonder, but it's like there's a lot of people who are adamant that they have the real deal. So
yeah, That one in the photo was mine, so.
Uh-huh, right,
Yeah,
right.
they cut them and propagate them, sell them at the museum.
Yep.
Yep.
once a year.
Yep, yep. Oh, goodness. Well, if all good things may need to come to an end, as we're ending this series, please feel free to email me with suggestions for next year and any comments or thoughts you have. Just feel, my email's always open. So, yeah, and our goal is to have everything set next year by October 1st to know what we're doing so that this form can be publicized in a publication that the Cedar Rapids or that the library puts out. So we haven't really made it for that one yet, but I'd like to get us in that one because we've really got our sea legs, I think. So, we're not done yet.
Good.
So
Thank you, Elaine. You've done a fabulous, fabulous job organizing all of this. I really thank you. Thank you.
well, you're more than welcome.
Can't
what
thank
goes
you
on-
enough. Just
Well,
wonderful.
well, it wouldn't, at this point, it wouldn't be winter without us, right?
Yeah.
Doing this.
I don't know what season it is today.
Well, I know there's that, but
For those who aren't here, we went from like 70 degrees to about 20 degrees in one day.
right, right.
With a wind chill, it's gotta be below zero.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
terrible.
it's just awful, but so are we going to have a publication? Because we didn't do a lot of course, maybe it's just me, I didn't do a lot of writing at all.
Well, you still have it. You still have the opportunity. I put a deadline out of March 17th for anything that anybody would like in the publication.
Okay. I have a story that's not finished, but its title is How Steve Hankin and his friend, his friend, and right now I can't think of it, saved my life during the summer of 2023. It's
Well,
big story. Yeah.
I want to read that one.
Me too.
Yes, yeah. Oh, they were like a gift from the universe, truly. But
oh, that's great.
worth waiting.
Well, yeah. I mean, whatever you're thinking, we want the authentic voices of Grant Wood Country and the people who've rolled around in it all this time. That's what we're looking for. We don't have line length limits. We don't have character limits. You do you. So poetry, short fiction, essays, snippets, feel free to just shoot them at me and we'll get it in there. So yeah, my deadline, I'm trying to give birth to this thing in April. So I really need everything. And my friend Kathy, who's a graphic designer, is helping me out this time. So we'll see. We'll have a new look by a professional, somebody who really, really has done this big time in a big way as a living. So I'm anxious on that. So anyway,
I want to say thank you too. It's been a wonderful 3 years of studying Grant Wood. Who knew? But it's been wonderful just to be part of it.
Well, everybody, we've lingered and thank you again, Ben, for all your 7 years of work or whatever it took to give birth to that wonderful presentation. And I just know that there's going to be people, once they know that it exists, that if I'm sure anybody here would be happy to recommend you if you need it, so. And thank you, Mark, for sharing your music, and for Audrey and Linda for your poems, and Paul for his factoids, and Joe for his news of the week. We've been the lucky ones. So take care, everybody. I think we got to go.